Good morning and welcome to our ConnectShip iShip Reach webinar. My name is Krista Barnes and I will be hosting your webinar today. Attendees, you will be muted for the duration of our webinar, but you can submit questions at any time in the QA window of the Zoom application. Once our speaker has finished, we will address as many of the submitted questions as time allows during our live Q&A. As the holiday season approaches, consumers are pulling out their favorite sweaters, sipping hot cider, and updating their online wish lists. In the world of retail, however, it's all about projection and preparation. 2018 is projected to be another record-breaking season, and early preparation is vital to peak season survival in the retail, e-commerce, and logistics industries. Here to take a closer look at exactly what is being projected for the fast-approaching holidays and best practices for success during the season is Rick Hernandez. Rick leads partner development and channel sales for Pitney Bowes Commerce Services and is one of the principal architects of Pitney Bowes' global shipping strategy. A graduate of Stanford University, Rick previously led research and development, customer service, and business development at Indicia, where he transitioned the business from a $10 million startup to a $100 million business. Rick has held leadership positions in product management and customer service for successful startups that have been acquired by SunGard, Travelocity Saver, Infor, Newell Rubbermaid, and Stamps.com. He has been awarded 8 patents and currently serves on a volunteer basis as the chairman of the Planning Commission of Half Moon Bay, where he lives with his family. Rick, welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you for the terrific introduction, Krista, and thank you to everybody for joining us for this holiday webinar. So today we're going to talk to you about preparing for the holiday season and doing what you need to do to crush your holiday performance and beyond. So today's agenda, we're going to talk about mastering the post-purchase experience. We're going to talk about the returns paradox and why you should consider using U.S. Postal Service in your mix. And then we're also going to spend a little bit of time talking about your keys for holiday success. So just before we get started, I think everybody here is aware of some of the most important holiday dates. One of the things that's becoming increasingly important in the e-commerce world is Singles Day, which starts on November 11th. It's a very popular day that Alibaba has helped get everybody excited about in China, and that has spread into the US market as well. So increasingly we're seeing Singles Day, which happens to fall on Veterans Day, as becoming an increasingly important holiday from an e-commerce perspective. After that, of course, we roll into Thanksgiving and Black Friday on November 23rd, and Small Business Saturday on November 24th. And then, you know, the big day we see Monday, November 26th, Cyber Monday. That whole spread is just a massive amount of e-commerce activity happening. The other holidays that are worth thinking about are, you know, there's this concept of a free shipping day in December 14th, which is another way to sort of boost your last minute Christmas sales that week going into the Christmas week. And then as we get towards the end of the year, another important consideration for you is, you know, you got to look at New Year's and what are you doing about returns and the post-holiday period. Going into the holiday season, we have Halloween spending is an important precursor to what's happening. So if you look at the amount of spending that happens during Halloween, it's a very good predictor of how much spending happens during the holiday season. So increasingly folks are spending more and more during the Halloween period, and we also see e-commerce rising commensurately. I think the important thing to take into consideration is if you look at the forecast for Halloween this year, people expect it to be a very, very big holiday. So all indications are that the 2018 holiday season should be pretty positive and stronger than last year. Now, one of the things to think about, and I know most of you have already done a lot of the planning here, is the key insight that we've done through our consumer research is we've determined that, you know, people actually spend a lot of time thinking about their holiday presents, what are they going to get their families, as opposed to just showing up and doing last minute shopping. Well, what we see is when we look at the data, if you are a planner, like many people here, the planning process typically starts before September and for about 17% of the population. And then going into September, October, about 50% of the time that people have spent doing holiday research has already happened. So if you're thinking about promoting your products and reaching out to customers, you know, this month of October is a pretty key time for getting the message out to your consumers. So if you haven't already started that process, I'd start making folks aware of, hey, I've got these interesting products, I've got these interesting new things that you know, maybe you want to think about, and maybe you want to come to me as the place to buy them, because that whole planning process is really effectively done before you even get to the month of November. Now, the bulk of the shopping obviously is going to be happening during the, you know, peak season during November. But this is where you really need to be finalizing all of your consumer awareness, getting information out there, reaching out to your frequent buyers, because this is when they're actually making their planning decision around the holiday season. So, you know, one of the things we look at is what's happening with the consumer experience, you know, and thanks to what we call the Amazon effect and the Alibaba effect, the consumer experience has been raised. The end-to-end experience is different. The expectations around shipping is different. The expectation around returns and how that's managed is very different. We're going to spend a little bit of time digging into that. One of the things when you look at the US market from an e-commerce perspective is that 47% of consumers are frustrated with the holiday experience, their last holiday experience, in terms of the post-purchase experience. So I bought something, it didn't work out, and that whole experience afterwards is really negative for almost half of consumers. And what's interesting about the statistic is that it's rising year over year. So the previous year it had only been 36%, and now we're up to 47%. And part of this is, again, Amazon has conditioned us to have hassle-free returns. Websites like Stitch Fix and Poshmark have also set the bar in terms of what the consumer experience should be like. So it's an important thing to think about from your consumer perspective, because it's part of what brings business back to your website. Now, when you talk about mastering the post-purchase experience, there's a couple of things that are really important. The first one is you need to make sure you're getting inventory closer to the consumer. And the whole idea here is that consumers have been conditioned to think about things from the perspective of, is it faster, is it freer, is it better? The second one is you want to make sure that you pick the right carrier for whatever you're sending. Sometimes you use the Postal Service, sometimes you use UPS, sometimes you use FedEx. It really depends on what is the product you're sending, who are you sending to, and what do you want that consumer experience to be about. The other thing we'll spend a little bit of time on is talking about the communication around the consumer experience. There's a concept we use in retail sales that talks about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where it's like once you get past the basic needs of survival, you know, having a roof over your head, food and clothing, you start to get into these emotional qualities. And increasingly, consumerism is being driven by this feeling of affection or emotional attachment to your brand. And one of the things that's, you know, most powerful about bringing folks back is having a strong connection, communicating with your customer, and, you know, when something goes right, when something goes wrong, making sure your customer is aware of what's happening. And the other piece of that is when something does go wrong, like maybe you picked the wrong product, maybe it's the wrong size, maybe you don't like it, making that whole returns experience easier is also an important part of what happens. And then, of course, you always have to think about your international consumers. So one of the things we want to talk about is, you know, how do you get inventory closer to the consumer? Well, there's a couple of, you know, we'll spend a couple of minutes there. First of all, let's talk about what do consumers want when it comes to your product offering. If consumers have to choose, if you ask them, what do you want? Do you want fast or do you want free? That is, do you want a free shipping with a slightly longer delivery time, or do you want shipping at a cost with a shorter delivery time? So you have to pay a little bit more for it. And in our global survey, we found that 75% of users across the planet, these are again consumers, say that they would prefer free shipping with a slightly longer delivery time over a faster delivery time that they have to pay a little bit more for. And this is really important when you look at markets like the United States or the UK, which are over on the right. Increasingly, people are much more happy with a free shipping solution because, one, the logistics network, the parcel delivery network in the United States, the UK, Canada, Australia is very reliable, very sophisticated. You know what you're going to get and you know when you're going to get it. In those countries where the logistics and transportation network is less reliable, let's pick on Mexico, let's pick on India, what we see is consumers are much more interested in getting the product to them a little bit quicker because they're worried about it getting there all together. So they know that if it gets there faster, they're much more likely to receive the shipment, and they're much more likely to have a positive experience. So they opt in to those higher priced shipping options because faster is much more important to them, because faster often equates to a more reliable service. So one of the things that happens though is when you're looking at, well, how do I manage getting it there faster and freer, right? Because everybody wants to have a quote free shipping service, and you and I both know that you can't get something for free, right? You've got to pay for transportation, you've got to pay for logistics. If you look at a fulfillment model where we're fulfilling from one location, let's say you're fulfilling from Indiana, right? And you're going out to the West Coast. If you take that same fulfillment, you know, for your higher volume, fast moving SKUs, if you move to a fulfillment location that's within, we call it zone 4. So in this case, we're picking something like Reno, Nevada as a fulfillment location. What you see is your overall transportation cost when you get this closer to a consumer is about 15% lower. So even when you factor in, you know, having to move something in bulk to a fulfillment center, your overall transportation cost is going to go down 15%. The other thing that's really interesting about this is when you do that, if you're using, you know, a service from UPS or FedEx, the same types of services, you're actually cutting your delivery time by 1.2 days. So if you can use fulfillment distributed across the country, you're getting things there quicker, and you're actually reducing your overall transportation spend because you're able to use carriers that can get your product there more quickly at a lower cost. One of the important things to do is to pick the right carrier every time. And so let's get into that a little bit, because when you look at this distributed transportation model, it's really important that we pick the right carrier and take advantage of carriers in the right way. So when we talk about multi-carrier success, first of all, let me go into a little bit of background detail. We work with a company called Calligraphy, and if you haven't used their data before, you should, because they're absolutely awesome. And they helped us go do a survey of retailers. So we picked fast-growing retailers, and we asked them some questions about the tools they use, the environment that they're in. And what we found is 85% of retailers are using carrier-provided single carrier shipping systems, which to me is astonishing, right? Like, you've got a system from FedEx, you've got a system from UPS, you've got a system from the US Postal Service, and that's what you're using for your shipping. Now, maybe you're using more than one of them, but you're not really set up in a pure multi-carrier environment. You're using a single carrier system. The other thing that we found is that when you look at the retailers that are, you know, again, we're going mid-market here, but if you're looking at folks who are doing 2,000 shipments a month or less, what's really interesting about their business is that they've had the same parcel shipping system in place for 90% of them have had the same shipping system in place for 4 years. So you've got a single carrier provided system. It's been in place for 4 years. And the other thing is that, you know, 40% of the shipments are being shipped within a 350-mile range. So you've got an opportunity there to say, system's been in place for a while. I'm not really doing optimization with my carriers. And if I look at my carrier mix, you know, or look at where I'm fulfilling from, there may be opportunities for me to save quite a bit of money on my shipping. And so, and even though this data is, that we're representing here is for the mid-size merchants, even as you go higher and higher, we see a lot of companies still don't have a very sophisticated shipping solution. They've got something where they're using a single carrier. Maybe they've set up business rules that say, I'm going to pick UPS here, I'm going to pick USPS here, but they don't have a really well thought out process, and it's not automated. So as new rating becomes available, new services become available, we're not seeing dynamic pricing. So part of what you have to do is, you know, you need to be able to have a technology that's seamless. You need to know where the carriers are right for your business, and then you need to have clear business rules on carrier selection. Or you need to find a partner who can help you do all three of those things, because it's increasingly hard to do all of that yourself. So one of the things that's really important about the consumer experience here, and this is, again, you're trying to build repeat business, have people come back to you, is what does that post-purchase experience feel like? And one of the important things is when I buy my product, when does it actually arrive? When does it come to me as a consumer? And what we find, and this is really shocking to me, is the average purchase online has 8 tracking requests for every parcel that's shipped. Now, some people are much more confident that, hey, I've bought my thing and it's going to arrive, and I don't look at my tracking. The marketplace that I bought my thing from, or the online retailer that I bought my product from, has told me when it's going to arrive, and for the most part, I trust that it's going to show up. However, if it doesn't show up when the seller has told me it's going to show up, if it starts to get late, I start hitting that tracking button quite a lot, because then I start to get nervous about, is this thing going to arrive? For example, if I buy something before a trip, I need to know, is it going to get here? And then that whole consumer experience starts to go south. So what you need to make sure is that you have really quality tracking events for your parcels. And I can tell you, if you have a delay in a tracking event, if something's not getting scanned, if your process isn't A+, and you're not communicating to your customers, then you're going to start to see a lot of frustration. And so what we find is it's really important for you to make sure you tell your customer, hey, this is going to arrive in 5 days. And they're okay with that, if it's going to arrive in 5 days, as long as it arrives in 5 days. When you start violating the expectation around when something's going to get delivered, you start to see the number of tracking requests per transaction shoot up. There's also a segment of the population, which surprised me, who are always checking the tracking requests. They're constantly pinging these sites because they want to know exactly when their product's going to arrive. Maybe their house isn't the best place to have things dropped off. Maybe they just are really interested in whatever it is they purchased. But there are a number of folks who, while there are some who do very few, there are some who consistently do a great number of tracking requests because they're very interested and passionate about whether or not their product arrives. Now, what's really good is most of the retailers and most of the companies you work with do a great job on providing transit triggers on deliveries. So that means when it arrives, you tell people it's arrived. You're also providing updates along the way. So about 92% of businesses in the retail space are providing that kind of visibility that customers are accustomed to. Now, what's really interesting is when you get to the return side of it, when you decide to go ahead and push the product back, only 7% of retailers are providing transit triggers. That means when that return item has gotten scanned and received by a carrier, they're not getting any message. When it's come back to your fulfillment center, they may not be getting a message then. They're typically, and they may not even get an alert or a notification when you've completed the whole returns process. It just kind of happens behind the scenes. This is, again, it creates that anxiety for a customer. It makes them unhappy. It makes them uncomfortable. They've got to go looking, hey, did my return get processed? And sometimes returns don't get processed. So now you've taken this consumer experience and you've turned it into something that is not an A+ experience. And that's something that we need to think about as businesses. How do we help our customers? How do we help the retailers deliver a better post-consumer experience? So again, one of the big things is you want to try to push data to customers. You want to make it information available to them where they're at. Mobile's obviously a great way to do that. And it's always good to make sure you provide appropriate and interesting content to customers around their package. And you don't have to stop at the delivery. So you can even have follow-up things of, hey, how was your product? Are you happy with it? So these are ways, do you need an additional item to go with that to have a better experience? So these are things to be thinking about. And one of the goals is you want to try to keep the customer happy. You want to keep them engaged, and you want to keep them from having to go to your website and track things down and figure out, what's happening. You don't want them to have to engage your customer support team. And again, part of that is make the returns easy. So, when you look at U.S. consumers, this is kind of a crazy number. nearly half of U.S. consumers have kept an unwanted item because the return was inconvenient. It's just too difficult for them to deal with it. And then 40% of shoppers are not satisfied with the returns experience. So if you think about that drone you bought last year that like nobody liked because you couldn't figure out how to use it, or that sweater, and you're driving around with that thing in the back of your trunk, like that is a common experience. You know, the returns experience is too difficult, and you know, people just give up, right? But what that means is they're also giving up on you as a retailer because you've made that process too hard. They've got to lug something around and figure out, how am I going to get this to a FedEx location? You know, that's not a great consumer experience. Now, there are some interesting things about returns that are worth looking at. One of them is shoppers who review the returns policy for purchasing. This one always kind of surprises me, which is if you look at the shoppers, 67% are looking at the returns policy before they purchase something. But less than 2/3 of retailers have a complete returns policy on their site. So like it's astonishing, right? That this is such an important thing for consumers, but retailers often don't have that returns policy on their website. So it makes it difficult for a customer to figure out, is this somebody I want to shop from? About 2/3 of shoppers believe free return shipping is a key to a great experience, but only 1/3 of retailers offer free return shipping. The rest are trying to make a profit on it or make it sufficiently expensive that it discourages people from participating in returns. The other thing that happens is, and this is one of the most interesting stats that I think are worth looking at, is a shopper is 70% likely to buy again. Their likelihood to buy again is significantly increased by 70% if the refund is received in 24 hours. So if you have that return and you process it right away, as soon as you get that scan event or within 24 hours of the customer sending it, you're creating a massively better customer experience. And they're much, much more likely to buy from you. Now, what happens is 46% of retailers have a refund target greater than 7 days. So why do you do that? Well, I've got my return center. I've got a way of doing business. I want to verify that somebody's not cheating me. You know, all of these things are valid reasons why you have it in place. But when you think about the consumer experience, especially a consumer who shops with you frequently, you may want to look at the rules and how you're handling those refunds, because if you can get that refund processing within 24 hours, you're going to see a lot more return business, especially for your most valuable customers. So, you know, think about returns. Do you really want to make it so hard? You know, do you want a near-term profit or cover your costs on the returns, or do you want to get repeat business? Are your returns policies clear? Are the labels easy to find? And, you know, are you using data to accelerate refunds? Again, we all worry about fraud. We all worry about somebody doing the wrong thing. But I think it's really important for us to look at, hey, especially for my most valuable customers, can I use data to accelerate refunds? I know I go to the UPS store for returns I have on Amazon. I drop my package off at the UPS store for those UPS labels. And within a few minutes of me dropping that package off, Amazon has processed my returns. Right? That's the expectation that's being set in the market, is that you're going to do this right away. So why would you use the U.S. Postal Service? It's a good question. So first of all, the U.S. Postal Service is the #1 delivery partner for Amazon, eBay, PayPal, Jane.com, Wish, Top Hatter, Etsy, all these marketplaces, because it's really good for direct-to-consumer. Even Amazon, more than 50% of their packages are still delivered by the U.S. Postal Service. So while they're building out their own carrier delivery network, they view the U.S. Postal Service as a very important part of their service. 90% of eBay's transactions, 90% of PayPal's transactions are also delivered by the U.S. Postal Service, and similar statistics for Jane, Wish, Top Hatter, and Etsy. Now, for most businesses, USPS is often the best service when it's direct to consumer. Again, e-commerce, direct to consumer, that's what these marketplaces service. Small parcels under 5 pounds, especially under 16 ounces? Do you have small boxes that are heavy? Ironically, the U.S. Postal Service delivery network is very efficient for delivering things like car parts, replacement parts, tools, things that fit into a box that's half a cubic foot but could weigh as much as 18 to 20 pounds. You should definitely take a look at the Postal Service for that. And then, of course, where the U.S. Postal Service really got started in shipping is delivering to places where UPS and FedEx have surcharges or don't deliver. Residential areas, rural, APO, FPO, PO boxes, Alaska, Hawaii, Micronesia. These are all places where the U.S. Postal Service is a very good option, or sometimes the only option. When you look at it from a merchant's perspective, why should you use the U.S. Postal Service? Well, you know, if you're shipping with USPS, you're typically going to save when compared to UPS ground or FedEx ground. And the USPS commercial discounts are competitive with UPS and FedEx. In fact, not only do you have better pricing, you actually have a better service. So if you look at UPS ground, you're going to save on average a half a day in terms of delivery time when you use the Postal Service's priority mail product or use a first class parcel. It's going to be a much more efficient, much more quick delivery, because part of the reason is you've got an extra day of delivery included automatically. You get that Saturday delivery as part of the Postal Service, and very soon USPS is going to move to a 7-day delivery model. So it's going to get even better for all direct-to-consumer experience. Also, there's no hidden surcharges, and for priority mail and first class, you're going to get free return service. So it's a very good service that merchants need to take a look at if they're not already using. You also have free packaging options. You deliver to more addresses, and tracking with U.S. Postal Service is ounce for ounce, pound for pound, the same type of thing that you're getting with FedEx and UPS. There are a couple of variations where UPS and FedEx offer slightly better tracking, but and those are the exceptions, right? The 1% corner cases. But 98, 99% of the time, if you look at the tracking that you get from the Postal Service, it's every bit as reliable with just as many scan events as the private carriers. And the services you should be looking at are first class package domestic, first class package international, priority mail international. These are the core mail classes that really make you competitive and allow you to reach your customers cost effectively and reliably. Speaking of which, don't forget about your international customers. Cross-border is a new imperative. 93% of retailers are already operating or plan to go cross-border in the next 12 months. If you're not doing this today, or if you've scaled back your international, you should take a look at it. And you should really look at, you know, what are the right carrier mixes to reach your customers. And I would take a look at the first class package international. I'd like to take a look at the priority mail. If you're shipping on eBay, you should look at the global shipping program. You've got a number of solutions that you can use to get products to your customer, but you really need to think about, you know, what is the mix of products I need to get to. And I'll tell you, I just came back from a 2-week trip in China and Hong Kong. And while there's a lot of product being shipped from China and Hong Kong, Singapore into the US, those consumers there are very interested in buying US products. They trust US brands. They think that they're going to get a much better experience if they buy from an American company. So there's a ton of opportunity there in Canada, Mexico, the UK. You know, you need to look at these markets and figure out how do you reach those people effectively with the products you have. So when we talk about cross-border, sometimes people just think it's logistics, but it's not. There are a lot of moving parts around this, and sometimes you need to lean in with a partner who can help you with some of these things. How do you manage the post-purchase consumer experience? Are you using a global marketplace? How are you generating demand? These are the kinds of problems that you need to be thinking about. How do you deal with fraud? And, you know, if you're thinking about expanding, if you're thinking about doing something a little bit different, you know, this is an opportunity where we're happy to work with you with ConnectShip and help you figure out ways to help your business, especially the larger customers who are looking to expand. There are a lot of things that need to happen in order for you to be successful in the international return space, in the international shipping space. So, you know, when you look at consumers around the world, both in the U.S. on the left and, cross-border customers outside the U.S. and then U.S. customers on the right. One of the things you see is in the U.S. market, you know, people are frustrated about product quality, high prices, and high shipping costs. Those are the top 3 concerns that people have. And what's interesting is we have high expectations in the US market. We expect it to be very good. We don't want to pay a lot for it, and we want the shipping to be free. And if the delivery takes too long, then we get upset about it, right? But this is how we've been conditioned as consumers in the US. Around the world, other folks are starting to catch up to us. So if you look at this data over time, you're going to see increasingly more and more on the cross-border side, 59% of people are worried about high shipping costs. That's actually the biggest frustration that people have right now, is how expensive it is to ship something internationally. And then the next concern is how long it takes to get there. It's a slow process. It can take 5 to 7 or 15 days. I think many of us have purchased things where it's clearly coming directly from China or some other country, and it takes 15 to 45 days to show up. That's not a great experience. So these are the frustrations. Those frustrations you have as an e-commerce customer are the same frustrations that people have around the world. And, high shipping costs, slow delivery, inconvenient returns are 3 very important considerations for consumers outside of the US market. So again, when you work with your retailer customers, figure out how do they optimize their website, how do they manage their promotions and campaigns, do they have their mobile tools in place, and are they using social selling to reach customers? These are important things, and if you need help with your large retailers, as Pitney Bowes, we're always happy to help your customers if they need a little consultation. Again, faster, free shipping or same-day delivery are nice, but you need to make sure that no matter what, when you're working with your customer, you're giving them clear visibility on when packages are going to arrive. You might think about having a guaranteed delivery service where you can tell your customer this is going to arrive in 3 days guaranteed, or 4 days guaranteed, or your shipping's free. Consider using stores for fulfillment. If you haven't started looking at subscription-based services, it's another area to grow your business. And also think about the value of insurance, right? When you're shipping a product, sometimes customers they want this to be insured. If a product is damaged in transit, they want to make sure that the cost of it's paid for. And is that your cost? Is it the customer's cost? You should consider using parcel insurance as a way to help defray that cost and provide a better consumer experience. The other thing to think about is, how are you funding this? How are you funding your shipping? How are you funding your operation? Do you have the right capital? I know UPS Capital has some great programs through ConnectShip and through UPS Supply Chain Solutions. It's definitely worth taking a look at some of those. They have insurance products, they have financing products. Same thing is true with Pitney Bowes. We have a bank, we have insurance products, we have financing solutions. When you look at your business, paying with a credit card is not always the best option, because you have to look at your overall cost of capital and where could you use that credit, or there are other things you could use that credit for if you had financing for your shipping. So these are things to think about as you look at your business. So I think we've covered a lot of the key things we wanted to cover here. Just think about how the holiday calendar is going to affect your orders and shipments. Have you done enough to educate your customers on, hey, I've got these products, I've got these service offerings. Remember, it's always good to start your marketing programs early and make sure that they're timely. Think about your return strategy. Think about whether or not you've got the right mix of carriers, including USPS and your shipping mix. And then, think about, do you have the capital you need to keep your business running seamlessly? So just to wrap up, where are we coming from as Pitney Bowes? We've been working with the U.S. Postal Service for almost 100 years now. We process 15 billion mail pieces and parcels annually. We work with companies like eBay, PayPal, the U.S. Postal Service. We support more ConnectShip customers than any other value-added reseller. Now, most of that's in the enterprise mailing space, but we also have a great deal of enterprise shipping, so multi-location customers. So we're very familiar with ConnectShip. We're very familiar with how to reach customers through that space. We also drive cross-border logistics for companies like Harrods, Macy's, and Nordstrom. And, you know, we've got the largest postal delivery and returns network. So these are things to, you know, we have a little bit of experience working in the consumer space. We also work with some of the biggest and fastest growing brands in the e-commerce space: Deckers, Ralph Lauren, Neiman Marcus, Eileen Fisher, Victoria's Secret, Allbirds, Rockets of Awesome, which, by the way, if you have kids, you should absolutely check out Rockets of Awesome. It's one of the best subscription box companies you can find. So that's a little bit about Pitney Bowes, and I think all of you should know at this point that within ConnectShip, you can access Pitney Bowes. It allows you to get the USPS rates and services, not just priority mail and first class parcel, but the logistics services, which are, you know, the Parcel Select, the Parcel Select Lightweight. We also offer pre-sort mail services through the ConnectShip interface now as well. So all of that's available within ConnectShip. We also have cross-border offerings as well. And if you need help with that, you can work with your partners within the ConnectShip world. And if you need to get this plugged in, it's a very simple process. You have your ConnectShip tool, you have your postal component. If you're already licensing a postal component, you already have access to the postal component. All you need to do is work with your VAR integration partner. If that's you, you just need to, you know, look at the ConnectShip PB component and get that turned on at the customer site. And it's a very straightforward process. We've had people turn this on within a 24-hour period, be up and running within a week. And we have customers who are, you know, plan to be using ConnectShip through the holiday season, doing millions of parcels. We're very excited about it. It's a very straightforward process, and it's fast and reliable in terms of label printing time and performance. So it stands up in a high performance production environment. If you have any questions, you can submit them in the Q&A window, and we'll address any of the questions we have as time allows. With that, I'd like to turn it back over to Krista, and we will see what kinds of questions we have.
First question is, what are the holiday cutoff dates for shipping with the Postal Service?
That's a good question. So first class package and priority mail are December 20th. Priority mail express is December 22nd. Priority mail international for Africa, Central and South America is the 1st of December. And for priority mail international and first class package for the rest of the world, it's December 8th. I wrote these questions down in the Q&A panel, so if anybody wants to take a look at those or get a quick screenshot, you can. We will also be sending out an email and putting this content on our website.
Great. Okay, question 2 is, what is the best strategy for getting inventory closer to the customer?
Well, I think we kind of covered that a little bit in the presentation, but I think if you accept the thesis or the premise that you need to have your packages closer to the customer, you should look at using a third-party logistics warehouse or fulfillment warehouse for a portion of your SKUs, your high-velocity, high-value SKUs, and figure out who you can use as a reliable service provider for that. So that's one of the things that I'd take a look at if I were looking at how to effectively manage that type of warehouse volume.
Okay. How does the Pitney Bowes API compare to other PC postal providers?
Well, it's fairly easy to use. You know, if you use the ConnectShip interface, it's something where you can get it up and running in less than 24 hours in terms of configuration. If you already have the postal component license, it's very, very straightforward. So if you're already using one provider, converting over, it's a fairly straightforward process. In terms of the performance time, if you look at benchmarks we've had some of our partner customers do, we see performance improvements. It's about half the time to return a shipping label using a regular label format. If you use, so you're going from anywhere from 500 to 750 millisecond response times, depending on the provider. down to 250 to 300 millisecond response times through the ConnectShip interface. If you use a high-speed format like a ZPL label, you'll see something closer, somewhere between 50 and 100 millisecond response time. So it gets even faster if you use those formats. The other thing to look at with the PC postage provider is what are the scope of services that are available. One of the things that's really nice about ConnectShip is that it's opened up all of the USPS services. So if you're using a Parcel Select or Parcel Select Lightweight, or if you're through, like, for example, a service like our logistics service, or if you're using something like pre-sort services like bulk mail, marketing flats, these types of products, you're able to do all of those through the ConnectShip interface. And we have a customer who's just about to go live, who's going to be using the pre-sort interface for several million parcels a month, and they're going to ramp up to about 3 or 4 million parcels a month. So it's a really nice interface that covers all of the USPS services, unlike some of those other offerings that are out there.
Okay, we have one more question. So if anyone else has any that they're waiting to submit, go ahead and do that now while we're answering this. Rick, what are some initial steps merchants can leverage to sell globally?
Well, if you look at export markets from the U.S. to the rest of the world, the UK and Canada and Mexico account for about 35% of all exports from the U.S. And if you look at just e-commerce, the top markets for e-commerce from the U.S. are typically Canada, UK, and Australia. The market that's growing, so those are really easy to use, right? Because not Mexico by comparison, but Canada, UK, and Australia as Commonwealth countries, they all use English or what passes for a variant of English. They have fairly straightforward rules from an export perspective. And like in Australia, the UK and Canada, you can look at the de minimis and you can service the products there fairly easily. Canada has a $20 de minimis, which means you're supposed to pay taxes on $20 and above. With the new NAFTA agreement going into effect, it looks like that de minimis may be changing. So I'd take a look at Canada as a market. It's definitely interesting. Another one to look at is China, because the export market in China is growing very quickly. I've been out to China 3 times in the last year, and we're both looking for opportunities for import into the U.S. as well as export into the growing middle class in China. So it's something where trade wars notwithstanding, if you can look at that, there's a great demand for U.S. products and U.S. brands. Even when some of them are manufactured in China, the Chinese consumer have greater trust for products that are sourced directly from the U.S. I see there's another question that's been brought up as well, which is how are returns handled in Pitney Bowes? We have 2 variants on how you can handle, well, there's 2 variants on how you can handle returns within the ConnectShip interface. One of them is you can simply print a return label, and the same way you would print priority mail or first class parcel. The other option is you can use a scan-based returns, which is an option within ConnectShip where you can print the shipping label and you don't pay for it until it's scanned within the U.S. Postal Service's network. So there's 2 ways you could use that. You could just put it in every outbound box and then make it sort of a hassle-free option for the customer. And then if it never gets used, then you don't need to worry about it. But then as soon as it gets scanned in the mail, then that's when your PC postage account would be charged. We have a few other more sophisticated options. We have some full-service return solutions at Pitney Bowes. We acquired a company called Logistics last year, and they have the largest USPS-based returns network in the U.S. And we can do things like provide a full service return solution. So we can do workflow events, we can trigger payments, we can relist products in marketplaces, we can donate, dispose, or otherwise manage your returns through fulfillment warehouses that we have ourselves. So we have a lot of options there, but right now in ConnectShip, the 2 variants that are supported are the regular shipping label as well as the pay on use return label.
Okay, that seems to be the last of the questions. Rick, we would like to thank you and Pitney Bowes for sharing this research, and thank you to everyone who joined us. Remember, whether you are looking for guidance in cross-border trade or multi-carrier shipping systems, ConnectShip, iShip, and Pitney Bowes are here to help. Together, we can reach into new markets and for further access. Thank you and have a great day.